hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn Kern and today I'm going to tell you about 3 books that made me obsessive. As in, I could not stop talking about them, I could not stop thinking about them, I brought them up and tried to work them into any conversation with anyone because I was just so desperate to talk about them. And I thought that would be fun because we are here near the end of Advent, so we're having another cozy nighttime chat. It just feels more appropriate for Advent and Christmastide. And also we're headed into Christmastide, which means you have until January 5th to gift good books to the people that you love. And I thought I might tell you about 3, actually a couple more, but 3 that made me obsessive, and then also I have a gift from you from Clooney. And so I'm gonna do that first so that it doesn't get lost in the video and you miss it, because they have kindly offered 25% off their new collection, which is called Alta. Now, as you can see, this new collection, they are beautifully illustrated books that are in premium hardbound editions, which I personally love because I feel like the books last longer, they're more fun to hold, they look beautiful on the shelf, and I love when the outside is as beautiful as the inside. And so these stories and ideas are lovely. They're worth your time and your attention over, not just the next few weeks, but you'll see there is a Christmas theme to them. Now, when John emailed me, he was explaining that reality is wild and therefore you need a literary life that helps you cultivate wisdom in order to pursue and move in that reality. And he used this line, which is actually from Chesterton, although you may have thought like I did it was from C.S. Lewis initially. And the quote was, "I went out as a child into the garden, and it was a terrible place to me, precisely because I had a clue to it. If I had held no clue, it would not have been terrible, but tame." And so the books in this Alta collection aim to give us, the readers, our family, as we read together, the clues needed, so that while reality is not tame, we will see that it is good. So Clooney has been kind to offer 25% off to Commonplace viewers and listeners on the Alta collection with the code Commonplace25. And I will link in all the correct places so that you can go and see these new books. They're absolutely beautiful, and hopefully grab a couple to gift this Christmastide season. And with that, we will now get into the 3 books that I chose for this obsession video. Now, I bet you are thinking, oh, she's gonna talk about the Chronicles of Narnia. I am not. Middlemarch, no. Little Men, no. The Awakening of Miss Prim, no. All the books that I talk about repeatedly, yes, there are more than 3 that have made me obsessive. They clearly come out in my work all the time. The Abolition of Man, no. I do have C.S. Lewis in the pile though, of course. But I tried to intentionally think of 3 books that I hadn't mentioned, or at least didn't mention too often in my Commonplace videos, so that it would be something kind of new. Because obviously when you have favorite books and you're finding how the ideas connect, you can end up talking about the same things all the time. And I wanted to also try and see if I could pick books that were not obvious classics. Someone left a YouTube comment that they had discovered some new books by watching my videos. I think Paranesi by Susanna Clarke was mentioned, and that they appreciated just not being told the classics all the time, because the list is the list for a reason. They are the best that have been written, but there are also other really great or good books that should be read, and so I wanted to bring in some of those as well. And so we are actually going to start with biography. This is a biography of Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas. Now, this is not a new book. In fact, I had the chance to listen to Eric when he came through my alma mater when I was a history undergrad. And so the book has been out for a very long time. But I actually didn't touch it until maybe 4 or 5 years later. I had it, I just never really got to it. Which is interesting because, like I just said, I was a history undergrad. And I had this habit of occasionally finding myself with little historical crushes. Like I would just happen to take a fancy to a man that I was studying, and Bonhoeffer was my historical crush for a while. And if you were thinking, oh, that's so weird, well, I will say that it is a good thing to maybe instill in your daughters, to see great men who did noble and good things in their lifetime, because then when some 19-year-old boy comes around their dorm and is like, hey, sup girl, she's not interested, she's not impressed. She's looking for someone who will fight evil while still playing his piano every day. So I will just leave that there, that historical crushes are not weird to have. And we're just gonna leave that there. So Bonhoeffer it was just tremendously written. I like when a biographer is able to, first off, can we give credit to really good biographers, how difficult it is to get into the primary resources of someone's life, like into their diaries, their journals, their letters, if they had the chance to have interviews with people that knew these individuals personally, and piece together a hopefully true picture of their life. Like, I am reading those C.S. Lewis biographies, sidetrack. And one thing that is so interesting is his attempt, and I think pretty good ability, to understand Lewis at different ages, that as like an adolescent male, like a young adult, he was posturing in certain ways in his letters to his friends that were not coming across in letters to his father, but he had these issues with his dad, so he was hiding things, so he's probably more honest over here in these letters. Like, that's really hard to do, right? The complexity of a person. So I think that Metaxas is a really good biographer, and when he looks at Bonhoeffer in this, he looks at him as a pastor, a martyr, and a spy. I mean, Bonhoeffer is a very complicated character, the many roles and interests that he had. But at the time when I read this, I could not stop talking about all of the inner workings of the governments at this time. I catch wind of people being called conspiracy theorists and different things, of course, in our day and age on the internet. But I always find those interesting because usually people are like, governments would never do that. And as someone who studied history, I usually want to ask, like, do you, what? What? You don't think governments do naughty things? Governments always do naughty things. And they will lie straight to your face. I think the youths call it gaslighting. They will make you feel like you were crazy if you catch on to what they've been up to. And so obviously a time like World War II, we're working in the 30s and 40s. Sorry, the Christmas caroler just humming to himself, singing to himself, walking on the street distracted me. Basically, my point is just that in understanding, of course, with hindsight, which as a historian, you can hopefully learn so much more once you can get into the primary resources that were hidden to the people at the time. You do see how evil moves. Like, I remember being fascinated in college for a long time, like, what was the German church doing during the Nazi regime? And that's where I think Eric Metaxas's book really caught me and really it was absolutely enthralling, because he was able to take the theologian part of Bonhoeffer and meld it so beautifully into the spy part of Bonhoeffer to show that because he was a man of faith, he was able to face evil. And yet as a classical educator now, some of the stuff that really stands out to me is, like I said, he played his piano almost daily. He was in the middle of this massive war. I mean, he was part of the underground resistance. He was part of the Valkyrie plot. He was smuggling Jews into different countries. He left America. He'd been in America and he left to go back because of what was happening. And in doing all of that, he would still sit down to play his piano. Like, his need for beauty, his understanding of what moved the soul, what was giving him courage. I mean, to take it back to C.S. Lewis, as we always can do, without beauty, it's very difficult to cultivate courage, because when you lose objective reality, what then are you trying to defend? So anyways, I would read a section of this and then just like look over at my husband, who'd be working or be doing something else, and be like, guess what happened in my book today? I just had to talk about it immediately. It was that captivating. If you're someone who maybe doesn't think you like studying history, I think going through the life of a person is the best way to do it. Charlotte Mason obviously says this for our children. And when you try to study a large time period, that can be very difficult. You don't need timelines, you don't need fast facts. What you need is to deeply know the lives of a few people of that time to understand much of the time. And I think this biography would be an excellent one for you to buy for yourself and friends this Christmastide. And my next one is a new book. I typically am of the persuasion habit of not looking at books that are on the main table in the library or on any sort of bestsellers list presently. It's not a fair swipe, I'll be honest. It's not a fair way to judge books by the covers or the standing given to them by the general public, but it does save me a lot of time when I'm trying to find reading material. So I had seen Klara and the Sun on these tables. I had heard it mentioned on booksellers lists and things like that, but it wasn't until we were doing the Abolition of Man's Slow Reading group within Common House, which was our fall-winter course this past fall, and people started mentioning Klara and the Sun all the time. And I was like, well, now if this crew is talking about it, perhaps I'll go pick it up from the library. And I did. And whoa, could I not stop thinking about this book. So there will be spoilers. I'm not spoiling anything with World War II and the German Nazi Party, like you know what happens, but in this book I will be sharing spoilers, so just skip ahead if you don't want to hear. So I'm not going to tell you everything, but there are some things that I have to talk about because it is a dystopian novel of sorts. So the narrator is an AF, or an artificial friend, named Klara. Klara is very observant. Even from the very first opening chapter, you understand that Klara is slightly different than the other AFs around her. She notices things. She's studying her world. She's fascinated by it. She wants to understand how human relationships work, what their faces mean, their posture, how the sun nourishes everything, why people ignore this man who is clearly like hurt and might even be dead over here in the corner because he's a beggar. This nasty machine that causes pollution, why did they put that outside? Like, she has all these questions that almost from the start make you feel like she's a little human, which for me is always like a red flag. When someone is trying to take something artificial and make me think it's real, I'm like, ooh, what are you trying to do here? So it continues then. Basically, these AFs are created so that children can have companions because everything happens on screens. They're educated by teachers who only meet with them over the computer. Everything happens in their house. Like, maybe they have a neighbor, particularly the child who takes Claire home does have a neighbor, but some of them don't. Like, they just hang out with these artificial friends, and of course they're always being upgraded. There are new perks to them, new technologies being implemented inside of their hardware, and so people are just getting rid of them, getting new ones, right? So with Klara, she is taken home by a girl named Josie, who is quite ill. You find out more about that as the story goes on. But everything started to break down in my head when I realized how much more human, person-like, Klara was than most of the people living in this modern world. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and AI right now. And so reading a book like Klara in the Sun, where the robot is the most human thing in the story, even down to, here's the big spoiler, if you really don't want to know, skip now, that because Josie is sick and is probably going to die, her mother is taking her to these portrait times where she thinks a portrait is being made, like she sits for a portrait, but it's not. It's actually like a robot maker who is trying to physically make Josie. And then the mother has confirmed that because Klara is so observant, she can like insert her intelligence and observations about Josie into this Josie robot, so that Josie won't really have died, because we'll just make the robot form of her. That is what this mother is doing. This was an alarming and delightful, and never saw that coming. Can't believe that just happened. I need to talk to someone about this. What are we going to do in our world? How can I make my home a safe haven for persons? How can I highlight humanity? How can I put myself and my children in touch with the reality, the real things? Back to the Alta collection, reality is wild. How can I put us back in touch with the most real things so that reality is the enchanting thing that it is, and that my children are treated as persons, right? If you're interested in those conversations, which, hey, if you're hanging on the commonplace, you probably are, because we talk about humanizing rhythms, we talk about humanizing education, we talk about pushing back on modern habits that we were just born into and maybe don't even know or realize yet that we need to be pushing back on, all of those sorts of things. Let me recommend this book to you, okay? All right, which, side note for this book, another one that isn't a book but made me obsessive was Ian Forster's The Machine Stops. Now, I did talk about this if you watch some of my dumb phone videos about living like a human, and that sent goosebumps up my spine. I think I talked about it in maybe like 3 videos in a row, which when it's coming out consistently in videos too, it means I really can't stop, there's no filter in me to stop talking about it. And so I would say that would be a fun companion. You can read it in an afternoon. It's not gonna take you long, but these people live in pods, everything. The world of importance is just ideas, so it's all very cerebral. It's very Gnostic in a way, like your body is this pathetic thing you have to care for because it houses your mind, which is your real self, and it's the really important part of you. And so everything is done on screens in your little air-controlled, health-controlled, food-controlled pod that keeps you safe, and you just log on at the time that you want to watch something, teach on something, engage with something, scroll your Instagram feed, whatever it is, and that's where you engage. And then the pod person has to leave. She has to leave because her son demands to speak with her in person. She has to be around people who swallow. She doesn't like when they touch her arm. She drops a book and everyone's like so awkward about what, I can't remember if she dropped the book or someone else now. a book is dropped and she, like, no one knows what to do or how to interact with each other. It's just like, people are the worst. They're icky and they're awkward and they're very human and fleshy, and isn't that gross? I want to go to my clean, sterile, easy life of convenience in my pod. So that would be like another offshoot of this book that you could read as well. So it says 3.5 now. But now we will get to C.S. Lewis, because here we have Till We Have Faces, and kind of running on the same thread of the postmodern or even modern man versus the pre-modern man, which I do talk about quite a bit in my work within classical education. This is very, well, it's more than an exploration of that. Those themes come out heavily in this book. There are a number of characters that are foiled against each other. I don't want to spoil this. I don't want to spoil this. Also, it's a retelling. It's a retelling of a myth, Cupid and Psyche. So that is a literary technique where throughout the tradition, an author would take a well-known story and purposely change certain things in order to make a point, in order to say something true, hopefully true, to say something about reality. Maybe for their time, maybe just a different angle on it, but they would take a form well-known and then adjust it intentionally. Like, it wasn't bad form to do. It was fine. That's what this is. And many say that this is C.S. Lewis's most genius work. I agree. While it's not like my most favorite of his books, you cannot ignore its genius and its brilliance. So he worked on this for decades before it was finished. I think Tolkien even thought it was his best. Remember, Tolkien didn't like Narnia though, so I don't know how much credit to give him. But in this, what I was going to say is that there are many characters that are foiled against one another. And so you have the one who kind of is the picture of Greek philosophy, and then you have the one who's the supernatural, mystic, kind of icky part, I would say, of religion and superstition kind of mixed together. And then you have more of the modern man who has tried to separate himself from the fact that the world is both immaterial and material, it's spiritual and physical. Like, you have these characters foiled against each other, and yet you have this woman who has to go through this journey of deep humility in order to have a face, because we can't see the gods until we ourselves have a face. So it gets into image bearer, identity. I mean, it's fantastic. I would highly recommend that you, once you read, go and listen to the Literary Life podcast. They covered this, and I mean, as always, Angelina Stanford blows my mind. So that conversation was just fantastic around this as well. So I don't want to give the spoilers in this. So I'm just going to say it would tie in very nicely with what is a person, how are we formed, to what end ought we aim, the 3 questions that I always ask in education. And if you have any interest in the abolition of man that you may or may not currently be seeing, the fact that you think we live in a dystopian when it comes to technology, if you are curious about how to cultivate virtue in yourself and in your children through the ideas you bring in your home, through good books like the ones from Clooney, good stories like people like Bonhoeffer, different things like that, you would enjoy Till We Have Faces. Absolutely. And so with that, I'm going to say a happy Christmas to you. I will be signing off for 2024. I'll not be back till next year. And I hope you have a lovely time in your festivity and in your celebrations. And thanks for being here. I love being able to find other people who want to talk about books and ideas and education and philosophy. It's just really fun that, yes, the internet is technology, and yet on it you can find a shared love of old ideas and old books. So I'll see you guys soon.